Alright, in the last video we told you about how we're going to be soldering all these nodes together. Where we left off is we said you should tin all of these wires so that they'll be ready to get soldered together. Also, we cut 4 of these 20 or 25 centimeter long pieces of motor lead that are going to provide power to the cape, and that will also be pulling power from the Molex connector to deliver it to these nodes. One thing also I didn't mention, which is just kind of an alternative before going through with all this, and actually before you even tin it, if you don't want to solder these into these huge nodes and you have wire nuts just laying around, these sorts of things can be really useful as kind of a quick way of putting everything together. You can just put 2 wires into the node and the 3 ESC wires and twist it on. We didn't include these in the kit, but we've seen a few people do that and it seems to work just fine. So just so you know, that's an alternative. But the heck with that. For us, we're actually going to just solder the whole darn thing. As you can see, all of these are tinned. We're going to do these positive ones first. Basically just kind of group it so they're all together. I'm kind of using my finger as a guide to make it so that they're all at the same level. It's going to be really easy with the 5 of these for one of them to kind of pull down low. So you just have to kind of babysit it and make sure that that doesn't happen. So kind of getting them into a bundle here. And this is kind of a tricky part. As you remember, we pulled out some single strands from our twisted pair wire. I like to kind of go under one of these and then back so that you have something to pull against. I'm just going to wrap this around. I made mine a little bit short. Maybe it should have been like 8 or 9 centimeters long. This is really only about 5 or 6 centimeters long, but it still does the trick. Now I can let go and they're all held together. If you tried soldering it without having this, it would be a lot harder. So, okay, I'm going to use this to kind of just hold the e-chassis so you can see it. Now, this is a place where it's really okay to be super liberal with solder. I mean, you can just glob on a ton of solder. If you look here, you can see that some wires are going to kind of come out at a weird angle, and you can fidget with it a bit. I like them to all be somewhat parallel, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So, also because you have a lot of metal here, it's a huge heat sink. So it may take a while for the whole thing to kind of heat up. And once it does, it'll take a long time to cool down. So don't burn yourself, even if it's 30 seconds after. So now you can see I'm just kind of injecting a little bit of solder. It's just going into this. I'm moving the soldering iron around to wick solder into different places. It'll be really easy to get a big solder glob over some of the wires, but then if you turn it over, you may notice that solder didn't get to that side. So I'm starting to get this, trying to be careful not to pull any of the wires out from the bundle, flipping it over and kind of soldering around there. A lot of soldering is about inspecting too. After you solder something, you should always inspect to make sure the joints are good. It's really easy to burn your fingers here because you have a lot of thermal capacity. So now I've done that a little bit. I'm just going to inspect it. Looks like I might want a little bit more solder here, but it's looking pretty good. I'm going to change the angle here so I can get access to that. Okay, yeah, so here you can see it's gotten a little bit sloppy. This wire is kind of pulled down a bit and this one's up. It's still okay. There's still a lot of area to contact. When I heat this again, I'm going to see if I can push this forward a bit, but if I can't, it's probably good enough. I'm just kind of making it so you can see it with the camera. It kind of adds a little bit more challenge to this. But, okay, so I'll try heating this up now, just putting a little more solder on. Remember, adding solder also adds thermal conductivity path. And you obviously don't want to touch this thing, it's going to be very hot, but I'm kind of pushing the solder iron one way against these wires. Yeah, I don't think I'm really going to be able to move that other one, so I'm not going to worry about it. You can kind of see how I'm figuring out as I go. We just want to make sure there's a good, nice conductive path between all of these. But for good measure, I'm going to add a little more solder. So this isn't super clean by any means. If it really mattered, you could be more meticulous than I'm being about it. But for most hobbyists, this is just fine. For this application, it's just fine. It either works or it doesn't, kind of. As long as you're inspecting those joints, that's good. So, yeah, it's pretty good. I think that's good. So now just remember, it has huge thermal capacity. It's going to take a long time to cool off, so you can kind of leave that be. Now one other thing that you may want to get for yourself to make things nicer is large shrink tubing. We did include some shrink tubing in your kit, but it's really just enough for the motors, and it's kind of too small for this. So if you have extra, you can try using that, but if you have other shrink tubing laying around, that's good. If you don't, you can just put a lot of electrical tape over this. Here I have snippers. I was just cutting off a little sharp strand. So, you know, this is an option. This one you can see is kind of breaking, but that's kind of what we're going to do. So I think that this shrink tubing I have is a little bit too small, possibly. So I may come back and try it with a larger piece. So there's a load of conductor that's visible there. But I don't know, that might work. So then if you have a heat gun, you just heat it up and shrink it. I actually have one right behind me, so let me grab that and you'll see what that looks like. So just a moment. Okay, now this is a butane heat gun. I like these because they're really good in a field kit. You can take it anywhere without plugging it into the wall. But if you just have a normal wall powered one, that works as well. So you can see it's just creating heat there. And there we go. Shrink this around. Now what I might do for good measure in this particular case, just because my blob was kind of large and it makes it so the shrink tubing can't really fit around all the insulation, is I might take electrical tape and just wrap it around here for good measure. I mean, you just don't want it to short out. So there's positive, and now I'm going to do the exact same thing with negative. I'm going to bundle them together. I'm going to add the two wires, one that will be providing power from the Molex connector and the other one that will be delivering power to the cape. And I'll do the same thing. We already did it once here, so I don't think we need to show it on the video. But that's basically how we do it. And then in the next video, we'll show you what to do with all these extra wires. So there we are.